Okay, what's up? Welcome back to another Beckham's Reviews and Reacts video. Today we'll be doing Young Sheldon Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot episode. Yeah, it's been a while since I last did one of these videos, and it's great to be back. The last time I did a video was for Thunderman's Undercover Season 1, Episode 8, and yeah, the Spies episode. And yeah, return, and I guess I know it said the Gossip Girl Thanksgiving compilation that I'd be doing the Rookie, but then I was like, hey, years ago when I said I would, like 2 years ago when I said like a year ago or so when I said I would be done doing the Thundermans, I said Young Sheldon would be the next show I'd tackle, and here it is. My entire reviews for all 7 seasons, plus Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, plus the spinoff, Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage. We got season 2 of that going. So, season 2 of that is currently out, plus more. And, so yeah, time to review Young Sheldon, Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. I know we don't get the theme song until next episode, so no theme song at the start of this video. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, Young Sheldon writers. You literally could have put a cool theme song, but no. I have to wait till the next episode. Probably put a random title of the show. The random title logo of the show. But, this episode starts off with Young Sheldon, Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. Or pilot. This episode starts off with an adult Sheldon narration. This show starts off every time with adult Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, which I will cover at some point, talking about, it's kind of weird with this show because in this show, they do a lot of Big Bang Theory nods, so you would think that reviewing that show first would be because of the whole, them doing a bunch of Big Bang Theory nods to everything that happened in that show. But I'm not going to do that. This is a prequel. I don't know why they decided to do nods in a prequel. But yeah, saying that I've always loved the trains. In fact, if my career as a theoretical physicist hadn't turned out, my backup plan was to become a professional ticket taker. Or a hobo. I figured out that trains allowed... It's already doing it. I can't even get through 1 second without my new thing. This is on pause. Okay. Yeah. In motion. It's the same speed. Figured out that trains allow to prove Newton's first law. An object in motion stays in motion with the same speed in the same direction, balance and force. I feel like I'm on the moon, alone and happy. Then Mary yells, "Shelly, dinner's ready." But Sheldon's like, nah, he doesn't care about that. Yeah, adult Sheldon narrates, I don't care how dim-witted you are. Scientific principles, I don't know why he's calling you dumb, dim-witted. You suck, Sheldon, already off the bat. Adult Sheldon sucks. I always thought he sucks in Big Bang Theory, but man, he's calling out us the audience. Man. Yeah, it makes you smile. Of course, nobody I knew in East Texas in 1989 cared about the Newtonian physics. The only students they cared about was Wayne Fig. Then the best character of the show, Missy, calls up. Yeah, I'll have to praise Missy in the entire show because she is one of my favorite written characters in the entire show. Episode 1, already giving, just like with Chloe and the Thundermans, Missy is my favorite character. If you don't, Missy yells, Sheldon, if you don't get in here, I'm gonna lick your toothbrush. So Sheldon says, coming. And adult Sheldon says, that's my sister. And she's done it before. At the Cooper dinner table, George says, where the heck? Actually, he says the other word, but heck is a way better word to say because it probably won't get this. It probably is better than saying the HLLL word. But Mary says, leave him alone, George. Yeah, just says George language. But mainly saying leave him alone, George is kind of like a way better thing. Sheldon says, I was exploring the dimensional connects. And George says, admit it, Sheldon's adopted. And Sheldon says, Georgie, how can I be adopted if I have a twin sister? Think, monkey, think. Yeah, roasting. Sheldon's already off the bat, he's already roasting Georgie. That dude's gonna get a spin-off in the future. But technically when they didn't think of it, so technically when this episode came out it would have been the future, but now he has a spin-off now. But he has a spin-off now. He is bound now. But yeah. Mary says, that's enough. Nobody's adopted. Missy says, I wish I was. And then Mary says, that can still be arranged. Yeah, for some reason, this is the only episode where Missy uses a Texan accent. Supposedly, she's meant to be from Texas. But I don't remember any other times in the show Regan Reward ever using a Texan accent. Aside from this episode. In other episodes, she just uses a normal accent. It's kind of weird. Like, I guess she just got tired of the Texan accent after one episode. Mary says, nah, let's pray. Sheldon says, a moment, please. And Sheldon puts on his other mitt. George says, do you got it, really? And Mary says, leave him alone, George. Again. Yeah, she says, leave him alone, George. She says, let him be. And George says, he can't hold his hands. He can hold his hands with his family. Georgie says, it won't kill him. And Sheldon says, we don't know that. Sheldon says, Georgie, did you wash your hands before dinner? Or even this week? George said, none of your business. And Sheldon's like, hence the mitts. And Mary says, I usually don't pray in the show. I'm usually not a guy, but Mary basically says that thank you, God, for this food we're about to receive and for the nourishment of our body and bless the hands that's perfectly prepared them. Amen. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to mention that every time they say it. Okay, Georgie says, how come we ain't we aren't got no tater tots? Mary says, I made tater tots last night. And then Georgie said, I would take tater tots over mashed potatoes any day. Yeah, he says mashed potatoes because unlike any of these cats, Montana Jordan, who plays Georgie, is actually a Texan. He was born in Texas. So maybe that's why they got him, because out of everyone that's cast, he's the only one who's actually a Texan. Mary says, just eat what I made you. And Georgie says, at least we can have tater tots tomorrow. Adult Sheldon narrates how it was family dinners like this that led me to adopt a mid-Atlantic accent. It was when Nobel Prize winners ought not be ordering tater tots. Mary says, I'm excited to start school on Monday, which is kind of like the 12th Monday, but also, which I'll probably release in this video tomorrow, which is kind of funny. Oh, my ear. Here's some rain. Okay, Sheldon says, I am. Missy says, guess so. And Georgie says, Georgie, freshman year, that's a big deal. George said, how can I be excited when Sheldon, he's going to be in the same grade as me? Georgie says, Sheldon says, don't worry, Georgie, I'm not planning to be in 9th grade for very long. Missy says, all I know is that he's not in my grade anymore, and I'm thrilled. And then Sheldon says, good luck with your finger painting. And then Missy said, "You're gonna get your ass kicked in high school," which is surprisingly they let a 9-year-old say the word ass. Of course, Mary says, "Language, girl," because you're like 9 years old. Wait till you're 18, or 15, since we see Missy grow up throughout the entire 7-season run, and we're crazy, but to review every episode, but still, Sheldon says, I'm not gonna be assaulted. High school is a haven for higher learning. George says, oh dear Lord. He says God, but Mary says, speaking of God, who's going to church with me tomorrow? George says, I'm meeting. George says, I can't. I'm meeting with the other coaches. Mary says, you can't meet after church. And George says, no, Mary, I can't. Meet after church. George says, he can't because he's got to study my playbook. And Sheldon says, I'll go with you, Mom. Missy says, why are you going? You don't believe in God. And Sheldon says, because I believe in Mom. That's one of my favorite lines that they get called back to. That gets called back to by the end of the series. I like that line. Mary says, well, Missy? And Missy says, can't. Heather asked me to. But Mary says, you're going. And Missy says, son of a sandy beach. Because, yeah, beaches are really sandy. You know that beaches are sandy. They're really sandy. Actually, she says the other word. She says B-I-T-C-H, but I'm not going to say that. I like saying sandy beach because it sounds like the other word, but it's not, because we have actual beaches, which are full of sand and ocean. Full of sand and ocean. Missy says, Mary flicks Missy, saying language. Georgie laughs at her, so then Missy and Georgie get into a food fight, which, of course, Mary tries to stop, then tries to get George involved, but, of course, it still happens. Adult Sheldon narrates, says, Jane Goodall, rest in peace, had to go to Africa to study apes. I just had to go to dinner to see apes, which is kind of funny. Meanwhile at church, Missy is shoving her hand into Sheldon, which, again, is kind of a funny Missy moment, because I like Missy. But, still, Pastor Jeff, best character? I have two best characters in the show, Missy and Pastor Jeff. Pastor Jeff says, in Matthew 9, verses 4, Jesus said that, would you entertain evil thoughts in your heart? Why would you entertain evil thoughts in your heart? Sheldon says, Mary, do you have any evil thoughts? I just don't think this part applies to me. Mary says, that's fine now, be quiet and listen. Sheldon says, I'm going to say he's now. He says he's only 9 years old. The most evil doesn't start till puberty. Then now the lady turns around, and then Sheldon says hello, and then she turns back. Sheldon says, do you think, Missy, do you have evil thoughts? And Missy says, I'm having one right now. And then Sheldon says, what is it? And Missy says, when we get home, I'm going to kick your little balls. Which is kind of crazy that a 9-year-old would say that. But, again, it's just a show. Am I supposed to say balls on YouTube? I don't know how I'm allowed to say that. I don't want to get demonetized for saying ball on YouTube. But she said that, not me. Sean says, you can't. They haven't descended yet. Sean says, Mom, when is he expecting his testicles? Well, that's when the old lady turns around and says, what's wrong with him? And Mary says, there's nothing wrong with him. Now turn around before I knock your lights out. Which is literally threatening. Pastor Jeff says, thank continuously on these thoughts, a good thought leads to a good thing. You can feel it in your body. You'll feel it in your, and then adult Sheldon narrating, my mom was my Christian shoulder. And for the record, they decided when he was 15, which was kind of his groins, I guess, decided when he was 15. I guess. Then at the Cooper house, Mary says, Shelley, it's time. It's the last day of summer. Go out and play. Go out and enjoy it. Kind of funny. That's the almost start of winter. And, yeah. Sheldon says, I have to learn the human handbook. Did you know extreme hairstyle, goatees, and mustaches are not allowed? Mary says, I didn't. Sheldon says, possibly that's find a way of I personally find that very reassuring. Mary says, look what a beautiful day it is. Sheldon is in shock. Then Sheldon is basically in shock, terrified at what he sees. Like lawnmowers attacking, dogs, people. Then Mary just says, go outside and go play. Sheldon says, go play, only if life were that simple. Sheldon then pushes the tire and says, there, I play. That's when Billy Sparks shows up, and yeah, I've talked a lot about, I've said that I don't like how they do Billy Sparks in this episode. They make him come off as a bully, when in later seasons, he's not a bully. He's just a good kid who's not smart. So I don't know why in this episode they have him bully Sheldon. It never comes up again. Why did they make the character out of character? Why did they make him a bully to Sheldon by terrorizing, by threatening, by taunting him, and then they just made him not like that anymore? Kind of weird. So Sheldon says, hello. Billy Sparks says, hey. And then Sheldon says, hello, Billy Sparks. Hello, Matilda Sparks, which is his chicken, I guess. And, yeah. Billy says, I heard you're going to high school. Sheldon says, yeah, I am going to. You're going to have to find someone else to torment on the playground. Billy says, torment? Because, yeah, this kid is not smart. And Sheldon says, it means to really harass. And then Billy says, harass? That's funny. Because, again, not smart. Why do I always find shows with her dumb characters? I'm looking at you, Billy Thunderman. I'm thinking of you, Billy Thunderman. But still. But at least Billy Sparks is kind of not as dumb as Billy is. But still. It doesn't help the case that they're both not smart characters. Yeah. Billy says, harass her ass? That's funny. Sheldon says, well, it was nice. Billy says, hey, doofus. And Billy makes his chicken screech at Sheldon. Sheldon yells, mom, running away. And Billy says, good girl, and leaves. Again, why did they make him this way if they were just going to ditch this for the rest of the series? Why make him a bully in this episode if in later episodes he's supposed to be played as the dumb, the nice kid who's not very smart? If they would have kept this bully trait, I feel like the writers realized that, yeah, if they wanted to make Billy Sparks the main character, they had to make him not a bully. Because he and Sheldon literally get on, literally have a good friendship later on in the show, I remember. Again, looking back at these episodes, I'll probably have a good time looking back on these because I kind of haven't seen the show in a long time. So, I haven't seen the show since last year, so when I first watched it. So, I kind of don't remember a lot. But, yeah. I just think that Billy Sparks and Sheldon are kind of enemies here, but then later in the series they become good friends. Billy's actually spends a lot of time with Sheldon, which is kind of interesting. Okay. In Sheldon's room, in Sheldon and Missy's bedroom, Sheldon and Missy are hearing Mary and George talking. Mary says, "What am I supposed to do about Sheldon's feet are growing? Why can't he wear George's old shoes?" George says that. Mary says, "He won't hold your hand. You think he's gonna put his feet in his brother's smelly shoes?" George says, "Well, he damn well or darn well better cut back somewhere else." Mary says, "Will you keep your voice down?" And they shut the door. Missy says, "They're fighting about you again, bro." And then Sheldon says, "They're not fighting they're fighting about money. It's common argument in marriages." Mary comes in saying, "Lights out, big day tomorrow." Sheldon says, do we have financial issues?" Mary says, "Don't you worry about that. We are fine. Now get to bed." Mary says, "She's lying. She just said that to make you feel better." And Sheldon says, "Mom doesn't lie. Sure, she thinks this earth was made in 6 days, but that's because she's gullible, not a liar." Yeah, that morning, I went to that line. That morning, Missy tells Mary about how Sheldon can't find his bow tie. Mary says, "Really, I laid it out for him." George says, "Leave it alone, Mary. Sheldon doesn't need a bow tie." Mary says, "It's his first day of school, and where we want." Sheldon yells, "Mom, I can't find my bow tie." Mary says, "Dear Lord, why does he gotta wear a bow tie?" Georgie says, Hey, can I drive to school with you, George?" George says, "Sure." He says, everyone's gonna know Sheldon's your brother. It's gonna be awful for you, man, Missy. Still best character. And George says, "George, shut up. Tell her to shut up, George." George says, "She's not wrong." Mary and Sheldon are looking for Sheldon's bow tie. Mary says, "It's gotta be here. It's gotta be around here somewhere." And Sheldon says, "It's not." And Mary says, "Shelly, calm down. We'll find your bow tie." Sheldon says, "My tie is gone. My tie is gone." Yep, Shelly, you don't really need a bow tie. Sheldon says, "I have to find my tie." And Mary says, "I'll be right back." Sheldon says, "Professor Proton wears a tie." I'll write people up in your heart. There's a lot of actors I'll be repeating in this episode. I guess it's only 3, but still, it's kind of funny. Mary says, "George Jr., which is kind of funny. His name is Georgie, but he's George Jr. She's like, "George Jr., give me back the bow tie right now." George says, "I didn't take it." So Mary says, "Don't you lie to me." And George says, "I'm not lying." Mary says, "Well, you're about to see about that." And George says, "Stay out of my room." And Missy says, "Mom's going to find your dirty magazine." And George says, "Shut up." And says, "You are not having a good day." Again, best character. I'm going to have to talk about every time how I just love Missy's one-liners in this show. Missy is looking for bow tie in Georgie's room when George comes in saying he didn't take it. Mary says, "And what happened to it?" Sheldon goes to the bathroom to look for the bow tie. George says, "I took it." Mary says, "Why would you do that?" And George says, "Mary, Sheldon is 9 years old. He's going to high school. Isn't it weird enough? Isn't that weird enough?" Mary says, "Give it to me." Mary says, "Come on. It's not just Sheldon. George is going to be in the same class with him." Sheldon wants to say not in the bathroom, and Mary says, "Give it." Then in the car, of course, Sheldon put his bow tie on, found his bow tie on his shirt. Sheldon says, "Would you like to play a driving game?" Mary says, "Not really. I always lose." Sheldon says, "I know. That's why it's fun, because Sheldon sometimes is a jerk. But it's fun how license plate with prime numbers." with prime numbers followed by cons. Mary says, "Why don't we just talk?" Sheldon says, "Very well." Mary says, "You understand some people are going to be intimidated by you because of how smart you are." Sheldon says, "Or maybe they'll recognize my intellect and make me their leader." Then Mary prays, saying, "Lord, look after her son. Don't let him get stuffed in a gym bag." Then at Medford High School, because, yeah, we had Hinville High School, we had Hinville High, and now in this show we have Medford High. Sheldon said, "I won't be done with Diamonds. If you think that the cover is done, it's not. I'm just waiting for more of the episodes. I still can't believe that Paramount Plus listed some of the episodes of Season 1 of Thurman's as Season 2. It's so crazy. Season 2 of Thurman's Undercover hasn't even started yet, and Paramount Plus has listed the Season 2 episodes, Season 1 episodes as Season 2. I know they're Season 1 episodes. I don't care what Paramount Plus says. Or, I don't care that they say it's Paramount, that it's Season 1 when it's actually Season 2. Season 2 when it's actually Season 1. Still. Also, the movie of Thunderman's Undercover is coming out next year. Can't believe we're getting Thunderman's movie 2, Clash of the Thundermans next year. Next year's gonna be crazy for stuff. Sheldon says, "Oh dear." Mary says, "Yeah." Sheldon says, "That boy has an exposed tattoo." Mary says, "He does." Sheldon says, "I wonder if he knows that's a violation of the dress code." Mary says, "Speaking of which, how about lose the bow tie?" Sheldon says, "Why?" And Mary says, "Look around. All the other kids are wearing one." Sheldon says, "I could start a fad." Yeah, why'd they do the whole thing of him losing the bow tie if she was just going to tell him to get rid of it? What was the whole point of the previous scene? What was the whole point of the previous scene if she was like, hey, if you told George to give her the bow tie to Sheldon, if she was just going to tell him to take it off anyway? What was the whole point of that? Mary says, "No, you won't. Please trust your mommy." Alright. Tell you what. Take it off, and this weekend I'll take you to Radio Shack. So Sheldon takes off the bow tie because Radio Shack is more important to him than a bow tie. As they go inside. Inside, Sheldon says, "You doing it?" Mary says, "Are you okay?" And Sheldon says, "I guess. It smells like ammonia. They must have done a thorough cleaning most recently. I like that." And Mary says, "Remember, if anyone bothers you, what do you say?" Sheldon says, "My dad's a soccer coach." And Mary says, and then Sheldon says, "My brother is a football player." I guess it's a football coach and a football player. Sheldon says, hey, look, that girl's pregnant." Yeah, we haven't seen the girl. We don't even know if she's pregnant or not. Sheldon just says it, and Mary just says, walks him away while saying congratulations to the girl off camera. Was this girl even pregnant? Or was Sheldon just making a miscalculation? Yeah. After he's in the bathroom, Sheldon says, "Well, that was revolting." Mary says, "Alright, this is your homeroom." Mary says, "Do you want me to go on with you?" And Sheldon says, "No, I could have used you in the restroom." And Mary says, "Well, you have a good day, and I'll pick you up after school the same door as we came in." Sheldon says, "Are you crying or having an allergy attack?" Mary lies, saying allergies. She was obviously crying, but we know she was lying. Oh, that reminds me of that Mayor line from "If I'm lying, I'm crying." I loved Cartoon Tales. That was a good special short. If I'm lying, I'm crying. Right. Sheldon says, "It's probably ammonia." Mary says, "Probably." Sheldon says, "Okay, let the learning begin." Sheldon goes into his class and meets Mrs. McElroy. Yeah, her actress recently just passed away. I think of cancer. So it's kind of sad looking back on this show. knowing that this actress has passed on. The third passed away actress. The fact that the show ended a year before she passed away, and Georgie and Manny just started the year after she passed away, I'm surprised that the show hasn't done like a eulogy or like a in the living memory of her actress. I'm surprised Georgie and Manny has not done that. But yeah, R.I.P. to Mrs. McElroy's actress. I liked you on the show. You will be missed. Yeah. Miss McElroy says, everyone, she's Miss McElroy. In addition to being their homeroom teacher, I'll also be seeing you some in my English class and some of you on the volleyball court. And she also taught their parents, I guess. Yeah, she also says that she's been here for 29 years at Medford. Sheldon sees Georgie, but Georgie asked him to turn around. I taught some of your old brothers and sister, and sadly some of your parents. Which is kind of sad. That basically means that she's been in a dead-end job for 29 years of her life. I haven't seen not much I've seen until today. I'm pretty sure you're aware we have a student with us today who, despite his young age, is remarkably gifted. I expect y'all to make him feel welcome. Yes, Sheldon. Sheldon raises his hand to say, per the student dress and grooming code, this boy's hair is too long, and another boy is wearing sports attire outside of his designated area. And this girl's blouse is diaphanous or something, which means I can see her brassiere. Bro, you're literally can see her boobs? OMG. Man, Sheldon is roasted. Miss McElroy says, thank you, I'll take it into account. We have a few minutes before y'all start to fill out these forms. And she says, what? To Sheldon. And Sheldon says, in violation of the grooming code on 48, Miss McElroy, you kind of have a bit of a mustache. Roast. Then cut to Miss McElroy complaining to the principal about Sheldon. Saying it's a stupid idea. This boy does not belong in our school. Well, George and Mary just looking at each other being like, we are just... Principal Peter says, come on, Vicky, it's just the first day. Why don't we all take a deep breath? Miss Ingram says, heck with that. 5 minutes in my math class, Sheldon questioned my credentials. And Mr. Givens, played by the great Brian Stepanek, I'm surprised they're able to get him on this show, between him being on the Loud House. And he was also he used to work for Disney Channel with Sweet Up on Deck. We all know this guy. Brian Stepanek is great. Yeah, Brian Stepanek says, how am I supposed to control a classroom when a kid accuses me of being in breach of the hygiene code? Principal Peterson says, Hubert, yeah, his first name is Hubert, I guess. Yeah, Mr. Givens' first name is Hubert. It wouldn't mind you to kill you to take a shower a little more often. George, you want to wait in here? George says, well, Miss Ingham says, Oral Roberts University is a wonderful school. Mr. Givens says, Sheldon says I was intimidated by his intelligence. Then he offered to be my leader. And Mary's just like, oh man, oh Sheldon, look what you've done, bro. Yeah, he's just like, Sheldon. She's like, then Sheldon walks into a musical room after hearing the lady play the piano and the violin. Then Sheldon starts to play the piano and the lady says, do you know this sonata? And Sheldon says, no. Then the lady says, how long have you been playing this piano? And Sheldon says, I don't know how to play piano. Like, you just started playing, you started really good despite you being a beginner? That is crazy. Back to the principal's office. Principal Peterson says, I think that's his name. Let's check. George says, George, do you have any thoughts? You have any thoughts? George says, I certainly do. Mary, Tell him. That is just a funny joke. And slowly says, I certainly do. Mary, say my stuff for me. Mary says, it's simple. We don't have another choice. We don't have any other choice. Permanent Business says, well, you gave a good shot. We wish you luck with Sheldon elsewhere. Mary says, no, we don't have any other choice. He's got to stay at Menford High. We can't afford private school, and I sure can't homeschool him. Sheldon, he's done calculus and Euclidean or something, and Mary says, it's a Euclidean, which she gets. I say it right. John should. It's eliciting geometry. Guess where I learned that? Mary says, yes, we know. She's tired of Miss Ingram. I love it. She's just tired of her. She's just so done with her. We don't. All I care about is Sheldon my son gets the education he deserves. So all you're gonna have to figure this out. Principal Peterson, Coach, can you help me out here? Cause I'm dying. But George says, I'd rather not. Meanwhile, the lady's teaching Sheldon how to use the piano. The lady says, you have a perfect pitch. Sheldon says, okay. And the lady says, sweetheart, you should really pursue music. Sheldon says, no thank you. We just take drugs. And the lady's just like, what are you talking about, Sheldon? And I just love the lady. We don't even get her name. We just get her reaction of being like, oh. And like he totally offended her. Instead of I could use meanwhile in the football field, the assignment is the assistant coach. Yeah, the assistant coach said, the assistant coach said, Georgie Cooper, Stinson, you're up. Stinson says, hey, look, it's the dumb brother. Yeah, bro. He came out for Georgie, and Georgie attacked Stinson. George says, gets Georgie off of Stinson. George says, what the heck is wrong with you? But Georgie just runs away. He just gets up and just runs away. In the locker room, George says, where do you think you're going? George says, I quit. I don't want to play anymore. George says, since when? George says, since right now. And George says, all right, what is going on? Georgie says, what do you think going on? George says, you mean Sheldon? You can't let that bother you. And Georgie says, doesn't that bother you? You got come to the principal's office. George says, that wasn't so great. George says, I can't be in the same school as him. George says, I don't see what choice you have. Georgie says, right, ever since Sheldon could talk, I quit. Sheldon could talk. I quit having any choices. George said, it's hard, I know. I'm telling you it as your coach. Quit whining and get your uniform on and get your ass back on that. And George said, what about ask my dad? And George says, your dad's having a bad day. Listen to your coach, and he leaves. Meanwhile, Sheldon is watching Professor Proton with Missy. Yeah, another Missy scene. Yay, I love her. And Professor Proton says, can a clock be powered by an ordinary potato? I hope so, boys and girls. Again, R.I.P. Bob Newhart. R.I.P. I know he also kind of died in Big Bang Theory too, but his death in Big Bang Theory occurred after the show, during the show, while his death in real life took place after he died after young Sheldon. So it's kind of weird that he died in Big Bang Theory, but his character died in Big Bang Theory, but his actual death wasn't until after young Sheldon. Boys and girls, this is going to be supplies you need. Missy says, why can't we watch DuckTales? Sheldon says, because we don't learn anything watching DuckTales. And Missy gives one of the best lines I've ever heard, saying, it's TV, we don't need to learn. Yeah, Missy's right. TV isn't made to learn you. I guess it is. There are some shows that do teach you how to learn, but it is TV. You're supposed to just watch and have fun. You're not supposed to learn. Wow. Missy's right on this one. Sheldon, you're wrong. It's okay. But Missy is right. George shows up saying, Missy, go somewhere else. I need to talk to your brother. Missy says, why don't you go somewhere else and I can watch DuckTales? George says, go. And Missy says, I hate everybody. Or I don't like everybody, for child-friendly terms. And leaves. George says, turns off TV, and Sheldon says, hey, he was about to power a clock with a potato. And George says, not possible. Now listen, Sheldon says, am I in trouble? And George says, no, maybe. Just listen, you're not going to make it in this school if you keep ratting out people. Sheldon says, but they were breaking the grooming code and the dress code. I saw a boy with a shirt that said, bite me. George says, yeah, that's terrible. Sheldon, let me tell you a story. Why did you think we moved from Galveston to Manford? Sheldon says, no. I tend to wonder about the bigger question. George says, well, here's why your dad tends to wonder. George says, here's why your dad had a really good coaching job, and I saw some grown-up breaking the rules. Sheldon says, what did they do? And George says, it's kind of complicated, but football coaches aren't allowed to recruit kids from other high schools to play on their team. Sheldon says, and you told on them? And George says, yeah, you know what happened? Sheldon says, justice descended upon the rule breaker. George says, no, I got fired, Sheldon. And I got a bad reputation. Sheldon says, oh, so that's why you drink beer so much. Sheldon says, just do yourself a favor. Go to school tomorrow and mind your own business, alright? Sheldon says, Dad, are you sad that you got fired? Sheldon says, mostly angry, but yeah, maybe a little sad. Then at the dinner table, Mary says, alright, let's say grace. Thank God for this food that they are about to receive. And Sheldon takes his father's hand, and Sheldon takes off his father's mitten and holds his father's hand. Then adult Sheldon narrates how that was the first time he held his father's hand. Mary says, our bodies and bless the foods to prepare them. Amen. George Jr., wait your turn. And adult Sheldon narrates that I wouldn't touch my brother's hand until 17 years later, thanks to the invention of Perel. Then at Radio Shack, Sheldon says, you know what I find so comforting in the world filled with uncertainty? Radio Shack will be here forever. Dang, don't say that. How are you doing? To end the episode. And yeah, sadly, Radio Shack survived until the H2O year of 2006. So, yeah, that was the first episode of Young Sheldon. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that these shows are only 19 minutes long compared to my usual reviews of like 30 minutes. 30-minute videos. And also, yeah. And yes, I will be using my Young Sheldon Complete series for how I destruct these. I will be using my, unlike other videos where I use a streaming app, this series I'll be using my Young Sheldon Complete series guide to do the backgrounds for every video. So yeah, good I got this. Good I got the Young Sheldon Complete series because Netflix does not work. I tried Netflix with the U series and I couldn't get a good background for this video. And with Georgie and Mandy, that is only usable on Crave, and I don't have that series yet because I'll have to get through all 7 seasons of this first before I go on to do those. But yeah, thank you, Christmas of last year, for getting me this DVD set, because it would not be possible without me thinking of doing these videos. So anyway, yeah. Welcome to the Young Sheldon complete series review. I'll be doing every episode from every season. Unlike the last time I tried to do this, where I only did 2 episodes because I was caught up with Thundermans. I was caught up in my Thundermans mania. But now I don't want to be known as just the Thundermans guy. I did a bunch of Thundermans episodes, and I was mainly known as just the Thundermans guy. But now, hopefully, I'm known as the Young Sheldon guy, and mainly Georgie and Mandy guy, because I'll probably do that show. But still, welcome to the first episode of the Young Sheldon review series. Also, I'll mention in the next video how much I love the Young Sheldon theme song compared to the new Georgie and Mandy theme song. That theme song is awful, but Young Sheldon theme song rocks. We'll get to hear it next time. But until then, I love me some Missy Cooper, and I'll see you next. I love me some Missy Cooper. And remember, as Missy says in this episode, it's TV. We're not supposed to learn.